This is macOS Ken.
A couple of Apple takes from Wall Street, big changes on the app front, and Apple announces 5 All Mankind, or something. It is Thursday, the 18th of April, 2024. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from macOS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. From the With Friendly Analysts Like These file, Investors Business Daily ran a piece Tuesday that had Needham and Company analyst Laura Martin calling Apple's growth outlook anemic to negative. And yet somehow it is not as bad as it sounds. In a note to clients, Martin said, Apple's anemic and or negative growth outlook, along with expected cost increases to fund generative artificial intelligence, are the biggest gating factors preventing new investors from buying Apple based on our conversations. Did those conversations include the words anemic and or negative? Ahead of Apple's March quarter earnings report, still a few weeks away, the analyst has reduced expectations for the quarter. She sees hardware sales down 9%, iPhone sales down 9%, earnings per share down 1%, and total sales down 4%. If you're wondering how hardware and iPhone can both be down 9 but total sales only down 4, may have to do with services. Martin expects revenue from those to be up 11%. While most of those numbers may sound gloomy, they are actually in line with street expectations. They also don't have her worried. Martin maintains a buy rating on Apple shares. She has set Needham's price target on the shares at $220. Oh, she's also lowered her Apple revenue and earnings targets for this fiscal year and next, according to the report. And yet buy rating, $220 target. Less of a fan of Apple than Needham's Martin is former D.A. Davidson analyst turned Maxim analyst Tom Forte. New firm, new rating, new target for the analyst. In his inaugural note for the firm, highlighted by Barron's, Forte points to 3 primary uncertainties dragging on Apple in his estimation. Apple's, to him, late entry into generative AI. He says he and his believe Apple was caught flat-footed when it came to identifying the trend in artificial intelligence early and exploiting it. Because, Apple is famous for jumping when everybody else jumps. He and his think Apple is over-reliant on China from a sales and supply chain standpoint. And as far as Forte is concerned, Apple is too reliant on iPhone. With continuing pressure on the consumer due to high inflation and interest rates, writes the analyst, iPhone sales numbers are constantly at risk. With that, the analyst initiates his Apple coverage at Maxim with a hold rating and a 12-month price target of $178. Weird as this sounds, that is kind of a raise for the analyst. A note on his note from Apple 3.0 says Forte's last Apple target at his former firm was $166. It was a big day in doings for apps for iOS on Wednesday, largely down to one person. First, iMore ran a report saying that AltStore, one of the most popular alternative app stores for the past several years, is out of the shadows. It's been approved by Apple for release as an official third-party app store that anyone in the EU can install on their iPhone. In the EU because that's the only region where alternative app stores to Apple's own are allowed. Apple's approval of such stores is part of its Digital Markets Act compliance in the European Union. According to the report, AltStore has been available since September of 2019 unofficially, so this official release is a big deal for advocates of third-party app stores. This release allows anyone to distribute their apps directly through AltStore with their own store page. Not mentioned by iMore, though mentioned by 9to5Mac, AltStore is the brainchild of Riley Testut, one of the guys behind the console emulator GB4 iOS 10 years ago. He's also the developer behind the console emulator Delta, which hit app stores everywhere Wednesday, making kind of a big day for Mr. Testut. A piece from Mac Rumors has the deets on Delta. According to that, Delta is an all-in-one emulator that supports game systems including NES, Super NES, N64, Nintendo DS, Game Boy, and Game Boy Advance. It works with popular game controllers and supports cheats, save states, backups, syncing, and more. A separate piece from Mac Rumors points to how polished Delta is, especially compared to the other two console emulators, iGBA and Bimmy, that went into and out of the App Store over the past week. That's thanks to the 10 years ago thing I mentioned. The app is free and comes with nothing to do in it. Like the consoles it emulates, games have to be put in. Mac Rumors says there are no games included with Delta when you install it, but it can open zipped files that are uploaded to iCloud Drive, Dropbox, or Google Drive. Apple's App Store rules permit retro game console emulator apps, and Apple says that developers are required to ensure that their software complies with all applicable laws. Many see that last part as a potential sticking point. When the developer behind the game emulator Bimmy pulled it from the App Store less than 24 hours after its arrival, he said he did so out of fear. Presumably that was the fear of having Nintendo call down the thunder on Bimmy. While it doesn't sell pirated software, it could certainly be used to run pirated software. As for Delta, Mac Rumors does not expect Apple to pull the application. Still, the site says there's always the possibility that Nintendo could protest now that the app is more widely available. If you're interested, the piece suggests downloading Delta sooner rather than later. Punchline to the Delta story: it is available in Apple's App Store worldwide, except for in the EU. There, Testut is offering the emulator app in Alt Store. Go figure. Apple let members of its public beta program have it on Wednesday, or let them have them, just a day after a slew of betas for developers. Reports from Mac Rumors say public testing peeps now have access to the second betas of iOS and iPadOS 17.5, as well as the second beta of macOS Sonoma 14.5. If you're in the program, you know how to do what's to be done. If you're not, but wish you were or want to be, info awaits at beta.apple.com. It turns out Tim Cook wasn't talking about Apple's new developer academy in Indonesia from a distance. Apple Insider says the company's CEO is actually in Indonesia this week. Also, a piece from The Guardian says a volcano erupted in Indonesia this week, though pretty sure those two things are unrelated. Anyway, Apple Insider says Mr. Cook told the president of Indonesia that Apple will look at the feasibility of opening manufacturing in the country. Citing a report from Bloomberg, the piece had the CEO saying, "We talked about the president's desire to see manufacturing in the country, and it's something that we will look at. The investment ability in Indonesia is endless." Do you think there's a country Tim Cook visits now where he doesn't have to say something like that? He's like the planet's disinterested father. Dad, can you build a factory here?" "We'll see," drawls Mr. Cook. "We'll see." Coming soon to a TV, smartphone, or tablet near you, Season 3 of the bilingual, coming-of-age, dealing-with-age comedy, Acapulco. Apple TV Plus issued a press release Wednesday announcing a trailer for the third season. In Season 3, Apple says it's time to reconcile past mistakes and exciting new beginnings. In the present story, older Maximo finds himself returning to a Las Colinas he no longer recognizes, while in 1985, younger Maximo continues his climb up the ladder of success while potentially jeopardizing all the relationships he's worked so hard to build. The first 2 episodes of Season 3 will hit Apple TV Plus 3 Wednesdays hence. That's the 1st of May in speech less archaic. You can see the Acapulco Season 3 trailer now on YouTube. And finally today, big news for fans of the Ronald D. Moore alt history sci-fi series For All Mankind. Apple TV Plus issued a press release on that yesterday, saying not only will there be a 5th season, the show is actually getting a spin-off. In addition to the, let's be honest, totally expected 5th season news, the release says Apple and the show's producers will expand the For All Mankind universe with a brand new spin-off series, Star City. Calling it a robust expansion, Apple says Star City is a propulsive, paranoid thriller that takes us back to the key moment in the alt history retelling of the space race when the Soviet Union became the first nation to put a man on the moon. But this time, we explore the story from behind the Iron Curtain, showing the lives of the cosmonauts, the engineers, and the intelligence officers embedded among them in the Soviet space program, and the risks they all took to propel humanity forward. No word on premiere dates for either the new season of the old show, nor the first season of the new. macOS Ken, brought to you by me, and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handle by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.